junta chief vows to hold free and fair election. Washington pauses contribution to World Trade Organization. Good afternoon and Salam Malaysia Madani. I'm Shuhaida Arifin and you're watching World Today. At least 830 people had been killed and 1,787 others wounded in the Gaza Strip since the Israeli military resumed intense airstrikes across the enclave on 18 March. The resumed airstrikes on Gaza ended a two-month truce between Israel and Hamas. Over the past 24 hours, 39 bodies and 124 wounded were taken to medical facilities across Gaza. The fresh strikes on the already besieged territory brought the total Palestinian death toll to 50,183, with over 113,000 injured since the latest round of Israel-Hamas fighting erupted in early October 2023. According to a local media report, Hamas spokesperson Abdul Latif al-Qanu had been killed in an Israeli airstrike on northern Gaza. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said operational plans to expand Israel's air and ground assaults on Gaza are already prepared and approved. Also on Wednesday, the Israeli military said its air force struck over 430 locations in Gaza since the resumption of its deadly air and ground campaign in the enclave. Russian artillery strike on the center of the southern Ukrainian city of Kherson on Thursday killed 2 people and injured 4 others. The attack claimed the life of a 55-year-old woman who had sustained a fatal blast injury and a man who was at a nearby bus stop. An ambulance crew evacuating the wounded was among those injured in the repeat strike. The 33-year-old paramedic and a 63-year-old driver sustained blast injuries and contusion. According to Alexander Prokudin, head of the Kherson Regional Military Administration, the shelling of the city lasted for about an hour and a half. The Russian strike also damaged civilian infrastructure and vehicles. Law enforcement officers launched a pre-trial investigation into the commission of a war crime that resulted in the death of a person. Throughout the full-scale war, Russia has consistently used targeted missiles and drone strikes to knock out Ukraine's power grid, while Kiev has hit oil and gas facilities inside Russian territory with long-range drones. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese today called a national election for 3rd May, kicking off a 5-week campaign that is expected to be dominated by mounting pressures caused by rising cost of living.
This morning I visited the Governor-General and Her Excellency has accepted my advice that an election be held on Saturday, 3rd of May 2025. Our government has chosen to face global challenges the Australian way, helping people under cost of living pressure while building for the future. Because of the strength and resilience that our people have shown, Australia is turning the corner. Now, on the 3rd of May, you choose the way forward. Very much. Look forward to seeing you over the...
Albanese's Labour Party won a majority at the last federal election in 2022, but most recent opinion polls show the party neck and neck with the opposition Liberal National Coalition when votes from smaller parties are redistributed. Albanese earlier in the morning met the country's Governor-General Sam Austin to seek permission to call a nationwide federal election. Under Australia's constitution, the Prime Minister must formally seek permission to call an election from the Governor-General, who represents the head of the state, Britain's King Charles. Myanmar's leader and military junta chief vowed on Thursday to hold a free and fair election in December as he urged armed opponents in a widening civil war to renounce violence and pursue dialogue. Min Aung Hlaing said the military was seeking to hold a fair election and promised to transfer power to the winning party. He added that the elections will be conducted based on respective regional security conditions in accordance with the provisions of the 2008 Constitution. Despite being locked in a civil war, having an economy in tatters and dozens of political parties banned or refusing to take part, the military is determined to forge ahead with an election, which critics have derided as a sham to keep the generals in power through proxies. Since overthrowing the elected civilian government of Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi in 2021, the military has struggled to run the country and fend off a rebellion that has its roots in a youth-led uprising, which the army suppressed with lethal force. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen reaffirmed Europe's long-term support for Ukraine during a summit in Paris on Thursday, pledging to front-load the European Union's part of loans from the G7 nations to Ukraine. Von der Leyen said that the so-called coalition of the willing had grown bigger, stronger and more determined following the summit. It was the third summit by European nations following concern among Europeans that the United States no longer represents a firm bulwark of support for Ukraine in its three-year-old fight against Russia. Von der Leyen also said the summit had agreed that sanctions on Russia should not be lifted, adding that investing in both Ukraine and Europe's defense capabilities was essential. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said Russia was currently not interested in real peace and that lifting sanctions against Moscow at this time would be a serious mistake. Europe is under pressure from US President Donald Trump to take on a much greater share of the security burden in its own backyard. However, the continent's anemic economic growth and high levels of debt have complicated their tasks. Turkey's media watchdog imposed fines on 4 broadcasters over coverage related to the arrest of Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu. Sanctions were issued by the Radio and Television Supreme Council against programs aired on pro-opposition channels for alleged violations. İmamoğlu, President Tayyip Erdogan's biggest political rival, who leads him in some polls, was jailed on Sunday, pending trial on corruption charges which he denies. In addition to sanctions, as ZAC TV was ordered to halt broadcasting for 10 days, with took warning that a third violation could result in the revocation of its license. As ZAC TV editor-in-chief Ozgur Kakmachi said, his team would continue to work throughout the blackout and said that while he didn't see the temporary closure as a positive, he did see it as a medal of democracy. Turkish authorities deported a BBC News correspondent on Thursday after detaining him for 17 hours and branding him a threat to public order. Turkey's Interior Ministry Ali Yerlikaya said 1,879 people had been detained since protests erupted last Wednesday, adding that courts jailed 260 of them pending trial. Up next, Argentina announces $20 billion deal with IMF. Stay with us.
Hai, bersama-sama kami Awatar AI Berita RTM, saya Aaron Lim.
Dan saya Cik Rita. Musim perayaan ini kami ada sedikit pesanan.
Sebelum keluar dari rumah, pastikan pintu dan tingkap dikunci. Jangan lupa tutup suis dan paip air juga.
Periksa kenderaan dulu sebelum memulakan perjalanan.
Rancang perjalanan dan sentiasa berhati-hati ketika memandu. Pakai tali pinggang keledar dan elakkan penggunaan telefon bimbit.
Kalau rasa penat atau mengantuk, rehat sekejap di R&R yang disediakan. Atau berhenti di tempat yang selamat.
Pantau juga anak-anak kecil ketika berhari raya. Adik-adik, jangan main mercun. Bahaya.
Hari raya memanglah makanan sedap-sedap. Tapi makan kena beringat juga. Kurangkan makanan berlemak dan bergula.
Akhir sekali, pada hari raya ini, hargai setiap detik bersama yang tersayang.
Pesanan ikhlas daripada kami di RTM, teman setia anda. Selamat Hari Raya Aidilfitri. Maaf zahir dan batin. Syukuri Syawal.
Syukuri Syawal.
The United States has paused contributions to the World Trade Organization as President Donald Trump's administration ramps up efforts to cut government spending. The Trump administration is retreating from global institutions it sees as it odds with his America First economic policies. It plans to quit some, such as the World Health Organization, and has cut contributions to others as part of a broad review of federal spending. The WTO has already been hobbled by a US move in 2019 during Trump's first term to block new judge appointments to its top appeals court, which left its key dispute settlement system only partially functional. Washington had accused the WTO appellate body of judicial overreach in trade disputes. The Geneva-based trade watchdog had an annual budget of 205 million Swiss francs, equivalent to about $232.06 million in 2024. The United States was due to contribute about 11% of that based on a fees systems that is proportionate to its share of global trade, according to public WTO documents. A U.S. delegate told a WTO budget meeting that its payments to the 2024 and 2025 budget were on hold pending a review of contributions to international organizations and that it would inform the WTO of the outcome at an unspecified date. Tech billionaire Elon Musk, who was tapped by US President Donald Trump as his cost-cutting hit, said that his goal of slashing $1 trillion in federal spending could be achieved without impacting services. Musk said that he was confident his Department of Government Efficiency could find $1 trillion in savings.
Our goal is to reduce the deficit by $1 trillion. From a nominal deficit of $2 trillion to try to cut the deficit in half to $1 trillion, or looked at it in total federal spending to drop the federal spending from $7 trillion to $6 trillion.
Musk's cost-cutting Department of Government Efficiency estimates it has saved U.S. taxpayers $115 billion as of 24th March through a series of actions, including workforce reductions, asset sales, and contract cancellations. However, its saving total is unverifiable, and its calculations have been riddled with errors and corrections. Budget experts say Musk cannot reach his target without touching entitlement programs like Social Security, which Trump has vowed not to cut. China said on Thursday it was willing to work with France on promoting the development of the relations between the two countries. This was announced as Chinese Premier Li Qiang met French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. Barrot's meeting came after he met with counterpart Wang Yi earlier in the day, during which they agreed to hold 3 high-level dialogues on strategic, economic, financial and cultural issues this year.
我们大家都知道啊，现在这个世界并不太平，不稳定性、不确定性在增多。中法作为两个独立的、有担当的大国，我们更应该加强合作。 通过我们的合作应该为两国关系、为全球注入更多的确定性。
Berger is in China on a two-day visit that ends today. The visit comes as United States President Donald Trump upend global trade by imposing or threatening to impose tariffs on trading partners, including the European Union and China.
Argentina's economy minister Luis Caputo announced a $20 billion deal with the International Monetary Fund IMF on Thursday, aiming to stabilize the country's financial situation. The deal is expected to support the central bank's reserves and address debt obligations without increasing national debt.
It marks Argentina's 23rd program with the IMF, aimed at helping bolster the central bank's reserve levels, strengthening the government of Libertarian Javier Milei, and diffusing debt repayment risk in the years ahead. Concerns remain about the sustainability of the current exchange rate policy, as economist Hernan Letcher warned about potential inflation risks if exchange policies change. Public opinion is divided, with some Argentinians expressing hope for positive outcomes, while others remain skeptical about further indebtedness. The agreement comes amid Argentina's economic challenges, including high inflation and depleted reserves. Argentina's market have wobbled in the last week amid question marks over the IMF deal and fears over potential faster devaluation of the peso currency, currently held in checks by strict capital controls. Argentina's country risk index fell 14 points to 755 basis points on Thursday.
Lebanon on Thursday named asset manager Karim Suaid as its new central bank governor, a vital step to rebuilding the shattered economy following deliberations that drew on US input and divided the country's leadership. Suaid is expected to restructure the banking sector and fairly distribute losses from Lebanon's 2019 financial collapse, which erased the savings of ordinary Lebanese, tanked the currency and sparked an economic crisis still felt today.
In announcing Suaid's appointment, Prime Minister Nawaf Salam urged the new governor to focus on talks with the International Monetary Fund, restructuring banks, tightening banking secrecy laws, and prioritizing depositors' rights. Salam said it was clear Suaid was not his choice for the role. Suaid, who holds a degree from Harvard Law School and founded asset management firm Growthgate Capital in 2007, won the support of 17 ministers in the 24-member cabinet. Salam and President Joseph Aoun have both pledged to prioritize reforms to help secure funds desperately needed to kickstart the economy and rebuild the country following the recent war between Israel and the Hezbollah group.
6 foreigners were killed on Thursday when a tourist submarine sank off Egypt's Red Sea resort city of Hurghada. The Russian consulate in Hurghada said the submarine, named Sinbad, had 45 Russian tourists on board in addition to crew members. The consulate said 4 people had died but did not specify if they were Russian.
According to initial data, most of those on board were rescued and taken to their hotels and hospitals in Hurghada. The fate of several tourists was still being clarified. Local media reported that rescue teams had saved 29 of the 45 passengers aboard the submarine. The Red Sea, renowned for its coral reefs and marine life, is a major hub for Egypt's tourism industry, which plays a critical role in the country's economy. According to the company website, the Sinbad submarine was equipped with large portholes to let passengers see the Red Sea's spectacular corals and marine life, and able to dive to a depth of 25 meters. In November, a tourist boat capsized off Egypt's Red Sea coast, killing 4 people.
South Korea's worst ever wildfires continued to rage in southeastern areas of the country as the death toll rose to 28, with 32 others injured. Medium and larger wildfires have been burning across 10 regions, mostly in Gyeongsang province, since last Friday.
South Korea's Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters said on Thursday that 387,000 hectares of land had been affected, forcing the evacuation of around 37,800 people. In the country's previous worst wildfires in 2000, 23,794 hectares of land were burned. Temporary shelters have been set up across the region, offering food, blankets, medical care, and other basic needs to the displaced. Volunteers, local businesses, and aid organizations are working around the clock to provide support. Meanwhile, firefighters continued to battle the flames under dangerous conditions. The country's Forest Service raised the wildfire crisis alert to the highest level, while thousands of firefighters, as well as helicopters and fire trucks, were mobilized to combat the wildfires.
Up next in sport, Barca swept off Osasuna 3-0 to clear 7 points at the summit. All right, kicking off our sports segment, Barcelona swept to a comfortable 3-0 victory over Osasuna to move 3 points clear at the top of La Liga, despite the discontent at having to play their match on Thursday. The Catalans' appeal against the rescheduling of this game was rejected, but Hansi Flick's side, unbeaten in 19 matches across all competitions, still made light work of Osasuna 14th.
Ferran Torres and Dani Olmo netted in the first half, with Robert Lewandowski on target after the break. Barca were without key winger Rafinha as he played for Brazil on Wednesday in South America in World Cup qualifying, but cruised at the Olympic Stadium regardless. Flick was happy with the victory but said an injury to Olmo meant it came at a cost. The match was originally due to be played on 8th March but was postponed after a Barcelona club doctor died. Some players, including France's Jules Koundé, played 120 minutes on Sunday for their countries before returning for the game. Barcelona's win helped them put daylight between themselves and champions Real Madrid, while Atletico third are 7 points behind. Barca hosts Girona on Sunday in Catalan derby, while Atletico visit Espanyol and Real Madrid welcome Leganés on Saturday.
In tennis, Novak Djokovic turned on the style to take his place in the last 4 of the Miami Open with an impressive 6-3, 7-6 win over American Sebastian Korda, thus making the oldest man to reach a Masters 1000 semi-final.
The 37-year-old Serb made a strong start against Korda, breaking early to get a first-set advantage that he never let slip. But Korda showed great resilience in the second set, taking the contest to a tie-break. But the fourth seed looking for his 7th Miami Open title, but first since 2016, again came up strong, sealing the win with a powerful ace. Djokovic, who will face Bulgarian Grigor Dimitrov on Friday, had no doubt what had been the key to his success after winning 84% of his first serve points. A victory at Miami would be a landmark 100th singles title for the 24 times Grand Slam champion, and he said is glad to be finding a top level. Czech teenager Jakub Mansik marched into his first Masters semi when he defeated France's Arthur Fils 7-6, 6-1. Fields had enjoyed one of the biggest wins of his career on Wednesday when he defeated top seed Alexander Zverev, but he struggled to repeat the feat against the impressive 19-year-old Mansik. The towering Czech's big serve was too much for Fields, who had come through three-set battles with Francis Tiafoe and Zverev and showed signs of tiredness. Mansik broke out to an early 4-1 lead, but then led Fields back into the contest, with the 20-year-old Frenchman forcing a tie break. But having survived that comeback from Fields, Mansik was rock solid in the second set as he powered his way to victory in 75 minutes. In women's draw, world number 1 Aryna Sabalenka blasted her way into the final of the Miami Open with a convincing 6-2, 6-2 demolition of Italy's Jasmine Paolini. Sabalenka needed just 71 minutes to wrap up her win against the 6th seed. Sabalenka was never behind against Paolini, and the match was only tied twice at 1-1 in each set. She served 6 aces and broke the Italian's serve 4 times. Sabalenka will be keen to banish the memory of defeat in the Indian Wells final and the Australian Open final, where she lost to Madison Keys. The win earns the Belarusian, who was beaten in the Indian Wells final earlier this month by Mira Andreeva, a place in the Miami final for the first time in her career. She's only the 6th woman to reach the finals of both stops on the Americans' Sunshine Swing in the same season.
Now moving to F1, Yuki Tsunoda will race for Red Bull from his home Japanese Formula One Grand Prix next week, with a struggling New Zealander Liam Lawson demoted to sister team Racing Bulls in a straight swap. Lawson preferred to the more experienced Tsunoda when former champions Red Bull dropped Mexico's Sergio Perez at the end of last year, has yet to score as teammate of 4-time world champion Max Verstappen.
Tsunoda started the season strongly and has shrugged off an early career reputation for being excitable and erratic. The 24-year-old has been itching for the chance to show what he can do at a top team. Tsunoda has been backed through his career by Honda, Red Bull's engine partner, until the end of the season, and also owners of the Suzuka circuit that hosts the Japanese Grand Prix on 6 April. Honda are switching to Aston Martin in 2026, however, and Tsunoda's future beyond this year has looked uncertain, with last year's teammate Lawson promoted over him and the Japanese repeatedly snubbed. Horner had questioned the sense of keeping Tsunoda on after 2025 at Racing Bulls, given that the team's main purpose is to prepare young drivers for the step up, with others in the pipeline.
Chilean wingsuit pilot Sebastian Ardila Alvarez has set an unprecedented benchmark in aerial sports, breaking 3 world records by a significant margin with his Red Bull Starman mission, a high-stakes wingsuit dive that pushed the limits of human flight.
Alvarez jumped from an aircraft at an altitude of 41,470 feet, higher than the cruising altitude of most commercial planes. He harnesses the boots of a jet stream and making strategic body adjustments to maintain control while maximizing speed, distance and time. He remained airborne for 11 minutes and 1 second, with the jump taking place over the West Tennessee Skydiving Center on 22nd March, showcasing his mastery of the skies. The 3 world records that Alvarez shattered were speed of 550 km per hour, with the previous record was 397 km per hour, distance of 53.45 kilometers, previous record was 29.06 kilometers, and time of 11 minutes 1 second, with previous record was 9 minutes and 31 seconds.
After I exit, the main thing is...
That's it from us this afternoon in our top story. Myanmar's junta chief vows to hold free and fair election. Do join us again tonight on TV1 and saluran Berita RTM for more news, or you can always stream us online or RTM Clicks website and mobile app. Till then, I'm Shuhaida Arifin. From river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Goodbye and thank you for watching.